All right, so we're going to start. And yeah, George, I'll let you start it off. You are the one who's been telling me for months, keep talking to me about Dr. Dan Wilson, a lot of debates you've been watching. Um, I did try to get Dr. Kaufman, Amanda Volma, David David Parker, people to debate with Dr. Dan, and unfortunately, nobody was willing to, except for Johnny. So a lot of respect to you, Johnny, and of course, a lot of respect to you, Dan,
Dr.
for
Dan, sure.
taking your time to do this and agreeing.
Absolutely.
So a lot of respect to both of you. Dan, I know you're a busy guy, and I heard you on your video say, it's like a hobby to you. So I know you work a regular job, and I
Hmm.
really appreciate you taking this time.
Yeah, no
And
worries.
George, I'll let you do the introduction.
Hello, my name is George Woodyer, and I just want to say thank you to Dr. Dan Wilson for coming on this afternoon. And I do appreciate your largesse. And I realize, as Vinny just said, you have other commitments, you have a family, you have a life. And so I don't want to sound redundant, but so I imagine the majority of Dan's audience is not familiar with Johnny's audience, and the other way, and most of Johnny's audience is not familiar with Dan's audience. So, do you mind if I just spend a few minutes giving your respective bios?
Go
Yeah, I'm
ahead,
cool, George.
George.
We gotta move though, brother. So kind of like
Okay. So, Dan Wilson got his undergrad degree from Clarion College in Clarion, Pennsylvania. And by the way, if I make any mistakes, please correct me. Um, and okay, some science, biochemistry, if I'm not mistaken. Then he later went on to get his PhD from Carnegie Mellon University, also in Pennsylvania. And he has over 5 years' experience in practical sciences. He works for a research company. And so almost 6 years ago, back in January 2020, he launched his YouTube site, Debunk the Funk. And initially, it was basically, for the most part, is response videos to where people had posted videos online in which he thought people were wrong, whether they should wear masks, whether COVID is real, whether viruses are real, whatever. And since 2020, and he's shifted his focus somewhat. He does debates. Well, he started doing that more recently in 2025. He has done interviews with various figures like Dr. Paul Alfit, I believe, of Children's Hospital in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. He still does response videos, but he also has done a number of interviews. He's interviewed various people. And just want to say that you subscribe to the mainstream view of science and health, that you're very pro vaccine, even though they're not perfect, they do their job, which is vaccines in general are designed to prevent people from getting sick. And if they do contract the illness, they don't get their symptoms aren't as bad, and it reduces their likelihood of being hospitalized or dying, and also contracting the illness or transmitting the illness to somebody else. Would that seem like a fair assessment?
Sure. Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Um, and of course, it would
And
be safe to say you subscribe to the germ theory of disease. And a major component of that are these objects called viruses that which if they get in you, they can make you sick, possibly kill you. Now, depending upon your health condition, your age, your the outcomes are more severe. And that is one of the major roles of items like vaccines. Would that be safe to say? I mean,
Mhm.
does that seem like a fair assessment?
Yeah, that's a fine summary. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Now, um, as I said, I only have a
yeah, so
Johnny.
Johnny, yeah, I'll let you introduce Johnny too, and then we got to move on, George.
Okay, so and of course his debate partner, Dan's debate partner, is Johnny Cirucci, who has a slightly different take on viruses and vaccines in terms of what's gone on over, say, last 5 or 6 years. Um, so Johnny grew up in New Jersey, near Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. He's of Italian uh, descent, and he had about a 20-year military career. first enlisted in the Marines, later, um, or he was a captain in the U.S. Army, and I believe he did at least one tour in Iraq. And he's always had a keen interest in politics and current events. He has an undergrad degree in journalism from the University of New Mexico, and he's the author of 5 books over the last decade or so. He's done a number of, he's for also in that period, he's done a podcast called Resistance is Rising and others. So, um, does that seem like a fair summary, Johnny?
It does, George. I would say that Dan Wilson has quite a resume as a doctor of microbiology versus I'm just kind of like just basically a skeptic. I had a career in the military, and it was a poopy career. It wasn't a very good career. I hated at the end of it. I really was a malcontent, and it kind of pushed me into just asking a lot of questions. So basically, Dan would be kind of like a kind of foundational figure in his field, and I'm just kind of like, a pain in the ass skeptic out on the side. So I appreciate Dan's time today.
Okay, so on that note, I'm going to turn it over to Vinny.
All right, thank you, George, and thank you again, Dr. Dan and Johnny. And I guess we are gonna start this debate out with you, Johnny. We'll let you
Sure,
go
yeah.
first.
So I have the tallest mountain to climb. Dan just simply has to defend normalcy, and I have to kick against that. And here's the crazy part of it: it's all about in the worldview, the world paradigm, the two paradigms, the difference between so-called germ theory and terrain theory. And it really is a radical difference. It's a radical difference. So I couch this, and I'm sure I'm being a bit of a jerk when I couch this because I'm using euphemism. But for the most part, I would say terrain theory, it's kind of like what you would hope to see when you go into for a doctor's visit. It's my biggest problem when you go in for a doctor's visit. What I would like for a doctor to do is to heal you. You would expect a doctor to be holistic, to examine you entirely. You go in and say, "Hey, doc, I'm having trouble sleeping. I've got headaches. I've got neck pain. What can you do?" And the doctor tells you, "Well, I'm going to prescribe for you a pill that should take care of your pain. And if that doesn't take care of it, we'll cut that neck muscle out, and that'll take care of that." And rather than what you would think, for me personally, what I would need a healer to do is to take in the whole, give you a battery of questions, which you will never have, to give you a battery of questions. Start off with, what's your job? Are you married? Do you have kids? Are you happily married? Do your kids drive you crazy? Are you fulfilled in your religious beliefs? What do you eat? How much time do you spend on the computer? How much time do you spend on the phone? This is called alternative medicine, a holistic approach. And it is absolutely critical to your health to have all of these factors involved and examined. And it's very atypical for a doctor to take that into account. They are symptom oriented, and forgive me if I sound like a jerk, it's basically cut, poison, and burn. Treat with narcotics, treat with surgeries, and for the most part, all the things that are absolutely critical to your healing, your diet, your sleep, your relationships. Nowhere have I ever personally experienced a doctor that gets involved with relationships. How are you spiritually, mentally, how much stress? Meanwhile, what I've seen in my research is you absolutely can will yourself, worry yourself into cancer and death. You absolutely can will and worry yourself into cancer and death. And this is nowhere on the horizon for the medical system. And I've done some background on how it is that it changed. It did change from that. But I'll shut up for a minute, see if Dan has anything on that.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that that's a simplistic generalization of the medical field. I mean, and it's not my experience. It might be some people's experience when they go to their doctor, they feel like the system's not made for them. They feel like their doctor's not listening. They feel like they're not getting the help they need. Plenty of people experience that. When I go to my doctor, he asks me about my life. He asks me how much I drink, how much I smoke. He asks me if I'm active, if I'm exercising. He asks me uh, like if my kids are sleeping, how that is. And I also see a therapist to talk about other life issues, which is recommended by most medical societies to do that if you need that. And so I think that, you know, while the medical system does not serve everybody perfectly by a long shot, uh, the research that is out there and on what you should do and what does help build a sustainable, healthy, holistic lifestyle uh, is there and is recommended by most medical societies, if not your personal doctor. So that's, I think that's just a difference in maybe experience,
Sure.
possibly, but um, you know, you said something. I guess I was expecting to get into viruses
We
mostly,
will. Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
but you said you can will yourself into cancer. Um, that's something that I would disagree with.
Okay.
Um, I guess, do you mean that like if you are just not like mentally you can give yourself cancer?
Well, yeah, that was kind of hyperbole, Dan. Forgive me. What I meant by that is if you are not healthy and happy mentally, emotionally, spiritually, that can affect you physically. And I don't have data on this. I just have circumstantial evidence that I would say, for example, that where you have a married couple that have been close for decades, and one of them dies, and then within a few days the other one dies as well. There would appear to be a causal connection of emotional, where the other just kind of gives up. I've seen examples of people that are under extreme duress and then suddenly they die of cancer. So, again, I apologize for being kind of fast and loose with that. I would say, me personally, I would draw the connection that mental, emotional, spiritual duress can directly affect your physical health, and in fact, maybe even to the point of cancer or extreme problems that cause your death.
Okay. Well, so cancer in particular, it's a disease of basically uh, broken genes, right? As you get older, you acquire more and more mutations in your cells because your DNA is always dividing to create new cells, which means that there can be mistakes in that division. You're also being exposed to things like UV rays, cosmic rays that can cause damage to the DNA. If that doesn't get repaired properly, then that can lead to mutations. And you're also exposed to things in the environment that can cause mutations like mutagens or carcinogens that can promote the likelihood of cancer. So over time, uh, that damage in your DNA does build up, and that's what causes cancer. Now, if you are living a lifestyle where you are in duress, you are depressed, you are not living a healthy lifestyle, you are not eating well, you are drinking, you're smoking, you're not sleeping well, those are all things that can increase risk of cancer. So those behavioral lifestyles can be linked with something like depression and being constantly stressed. But I would say it's more of an indirect cause that those things contribute to cancer.
And this is a major difference between the two of us, where I would say it's much more environmental, and I would say that it's actually very dangerous. Part of this is big picture, Dan. Forgive me for going big picture, and again straying away from viruses and vaccines, but it's important to get the big picture. For me, I had a life changing event back in 1994. I became a born again Christian, and it gave me a different perspective. And it gave me a perspective on human nature. It gave me a perspective on interplay of power and money, and put me where I'm at right now to be a journalist and a skeptic. And so my worldview is that of being very skeptical and cynical in relation to power and money. And what I have seen, and certainly my background tells me, is that human beings are basically evil and selfish and self centered. And if you give a small number of people tremendous power, they're going to coalesce that power, they're going to abuse that power, and their goals will be to get more money and power as they beat down everybody else. And I would say pretty fairly that we've seen a lot of this historically through so called colonialism and particularly in the West. But this is what's important to me. So, in relation to my worldview, is what I mean. And so, as a result of that worldview, I'm skeptical. I have concerns if I see that it's my environment that is causal to my health or my illness, things that I'm doing on a regular basis, things that I'm eating, things are too readily available for me, fast food and soda pop and smoking and alcohol, versus things that are obviously, if I do the research, much more healthy. Vegetables and fruits that are not necessarily sprayed with glyphosate, that toxins that may stay resident in your body throughout the years, not being addressed. Radiation, everything. Believe it or not, I've seen evidence that electricity, simple phone, radio waves on through cell phone waves, Wi-Fi. I personally would say that a large majority of human beings have varied resistance to that, and it has caused some illness. And there are some books that I could cite, Arthur Firstenberg's Invisible Rainbow, for one, and that environmental causes. And so my concern is that when you get into dismissing environmental causes and simply with a wave of the hand saying, "Oh, that's genetics," I heard Dave Farina say, "Oh, you don't even know what autism is. Autism is a genetical problem." Well, here's the concern. If it's not genetics, what people mean when they say, "Oh, it's just genetics, go back to sleep, don't have any effect on your lifestyle, don't worry about these things that you're taking in, don't worry about your food, don't worry about the radiation, don't worry about your cell phone, don't worry about it." As soon as you pierce the skin, your skin is a defense barrier. It's a defense barrier. So anything you put past the skin into the bloodstream is logarithmically expanded, whether for good or for evil. And so I have a concern with necessarily dismissing what could be a negative to your health with just saying genetics, you can't have anything, you can't have any effect. Keep going, keep doing what you're doing. No, don't change anything. So I'm cynical and skeptical about how powers could benefit from that.
Sure. So I two things. First, I hear you on the colonialism, and when you coalesce a lot of power within a small group of individuals, uh, bad things happen. We're totally on the same page there. But I think the beauty of the scientific community is that that's not how it works. Um, you know, kind of how people view science is uh, flawed in a lot of ways, I think, if they're not part of the community, which is like, they see people who are figureheads at the tops of government organizations or Nobel Prize winners as like the people who, whatever they say goes. But that's not really how science works, right? It's a global, interconnected, very collaborative community where, people in the US are collaborating with people from multiple different countries, maybe to produce one paper. And all these different labs all over the world are all kind of competing against one another because they all want to make the next big discovery. Scientists, we all want to like win the Nobel Prize, so to speak. We all want to make a big, impactful discovery that will change the way we think or add to what we think. And when you have that whole system of people wanting that thing, it becomes a community where people are constantly checking each other, right? Like it doesn't matter if someone who won a Nobel Prize says something that's wrong. The scientific community are going to go against that. Like it doesn't matter about their status. And that's how I have seen the scientific community work. And it's also it helps that it spans countries and ideologies and religions. Uh, so it's not like one central idea that's running science. It's just let's see what we can discover about the natural world with objective experimentation. Um, and, there are certainly forces that try to co-opt science, like with the tobacco industry, we've seen that, where they try to give the public perception that science says cigarettes are okay when they're not. And when in reality, scientific communities for decades, if not centuries, knew that smoking was causing cancer. And that, I guess, leads into my second point, which is that my message is not that it's all genetics, don't think about it. Because even though cancer is a disease of broken genes, that doesn't mean inherited genes, so to necessarily. As you live, you can damage your genes, and it can be either through time or through environmental exposures like tobacco smoke, for example. Those things can damage your DNA. So there's absolutely things you can do to live a better lifestyle to prevent cancer, right? But it at its core comes down to damage in the DNA, and environmental factors can damage your DNA, like I said. So yeah, it's not all about just genetics. Don't worry about it. That's a misconception when people say cancer is a disease of genetics. You can inherit genes that make you more likely to get cancer. That's why we see some kids with cancer because they're young, they've inherited genes from their parents that are already broken, and they're more likely to develop cancer at a younger age rather than at an older age, where most people get cancer at an older age, where their genes have withstood a lot of damage. So, yeah, I don't want people to get the wrong idea that there's nothing you can do, even though cancer is a genetic or disease of the genes. There's plenty of things you can do to prevent cancers or reduce your risk of getting cancer.
I've come across something that seems very illustrative for me. I don't know if you're familiar with the 7 stages of disease, but this explains a lot to me if I look at it through this lens of the 7 stages of disease being markers for the individual that there's something wrong with their body. For instance, the first stage of disease, according to the 7 stages, is enervation, loss of energy, toxemia, buildup of toxins, irritation and distress, both physically and emotionally, inflammation of organs, tonsillitis, appendicitis, hepatitis, which is inflammation of the tonsils, appendices, liver, ulceration in the skin. Your body has toxins it's trying to expel and unable to do that through the natural processes, and so it opens up ulcers in the skin because the skin is the largest organ in the body. Induration, which is scarring. Your body will create pockets of the toxins that it is unable to get rid of. And finally, cancers. And cancer, according to the 7 stages of disease, cancer is the ultimate expression of your body screaming at you that you've been poisoned. So my own personal take, Dan, is that for people that are suffering from particularly cancer, it would seem that how many doctors that are treating you for cancer. Let's look at 1971. Richard Nixon started off a war on cancer with a $100 million tax grant. Today, it is $7 billion. And as far as I know, at that time in 1971, you had a 95% chance. Once you're diagnosed with cancer, you had a 95% chance of dying of cancer. And that has not changed in the slightest bit. So we have, 40 some odd years of taxpayer money being thrown at it. And do you have a different numbers on it?
Oh yeah, I mean it depends on the cancer, but there's been a lot of progress in treating cancers, and in the cancer world, cure um, is a hard word to use properly because cancer, of course, the longer you live, the more likely you are to get it because of DNA damage building up over time. But in practical terms, we have cures for certain cancers because these people are able to now live a full life. And if you live a full life, then you are essentially cured of that disease. So there are plenty of cancers where we have that now. We have treatments that have been that scientists have toiled away at to discover and implement and test, and we found that they work. For example, kids now, most kids with cancer will go on to live full lives. About 80% of kids with cancers, and that's thanks in part a lot to researchers like Sidney Farber, who did a lot of work on making better chemotherapies that can better target cancers and treat kids who otherwise would have just died young. And I think that's a huge achievement. There are also cancers like chronic myelogenous leukemia, which um, before the 2000s, you had uh, around like what you said, 90% chance, almost certainty of dying within 5 years of diagnosis. Now it's the opposite. If you're taking this medication called imatinib properly, you have a over 90% chance of living a full life with minimal side effects. And it's things like that that I think are some of the best stories in science, where, cancer is this thing where, no matter what species you are in the world, no matter where you're living, it will catch up to you if you live long enough. It's an inevitability because of we are multicellular organisms and our cells all have to work together, and those mechanisms they have of working together break down over time. Um, and I think it's really cool that scientists can come together and make drugs and approaches that can essentially cure your cancer when you get it. It's not all cancers. Many cancers we haven't made progress in, but there are many cancers that we've made a lot of progress in, and I think that's some of the coolest stories in science.
For me personally, it's kind of a red flag that as part of your treatments, there are drugs and radiation therapies that can cause new types of cancer.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah,
I,
so with radiation, that's not a approach for every cancer, but it's a risk benefit analysis where, like, if an exposure to a carcinogen or a mutagen is going to cause cancer, it's probably going to be many years down the line. So if you're 60 years old and you're likely to live till you're 80, but you have cancer, that's going to kill you in 5 years if you do nothing. You get radiation therapy, maybe that cancer goes away or gets small enough where they can remove the tumor. Then that cancer, you're ideally you're good. Let's say everything goes well. The radiation and the chemotherapy work, the tumor shrinks, you get the tumor taken out. Those cells are nowhere in your body anymore. But yeah, you had radiation treatment. That could cause a new cancer, but it's most likely going to be many years down the line when you've already lived a normal life expectancy and you've added many years to your life by doing that treatment had you not done it. So it is risk benefit, right? Um, Radiation is not a common approach in a lot of childhood cancers, for example, because the risk benefit analysis would be, oh, this radiation might have a risk of creating a new cancer when you're 40. You don't want that. So ideally, you use other approaches for younger cancer patients, which is the standard, right? Does that make sense?
sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I would certainly say that childhood cancer needs a special scrutiny because it is so um, shocking, debilitating, and I don't have the data in front of me right now, but I would imagine that it certainly would appear to be more of a recent phenomenon. And again, if you're doing the number crunching, who can you really trust? Certainly from my cynical skeptic perspective, numbers. I heard the joke once is that if you torture the numbers enough, they'll tell you whatever you want to hear. I'll tell you that ultimately my perspective of terrain, environmental factors affecting you in the 7 stages of disease makes a lot of sense to me, in that cancer is your body screaming at you that you're being poisoned and your habits are being poisoned. And it's my personal experience and also my experience as a journalist. I've not seen that really as an overall approach for oncology, is that, hey, look, you've had a very toxic lifestyle. You spent, for instance, great example, LeBron James, and I'm only doing kind of anecdotal here. My understanding is that he developed a tumor that would be roughly around where he would hold a cell phone regularly. And then he had the tumor addressed and became a sponsor of Motorola. And surprise, surprise, everything's good again. These everyday things that you do, the radiations that you can't see, that you're not aware of, that kind of sneak up on you, that I would hope that the medical industry would be there and be warning you about these unseen toxins. I mentioned the Furstenberg's Invisible Rainbow, and I'm not a huge fan because I still think that he pulled his punches on a lot of things. But he has a phenomenal point, and with each new advance of technology came out a whole new range of illnesses, starting with radio and television, telephone, and radar, and then cell phone, and then each new technological advance brought with them strange new maladies that human beings. Now, if you're really a cynical guy, Dan, you would say, okay, people on the outside would ride this. Oh, I've never seen this before, where I'm shortness of breath, I can't oxygenate my blood. I wouldn't even think that it was microwave radiation actually changing the structure of my red blood cells. It's got to be something I can't see. And this gets us into more and more, a lot closer to what it takes to be a doctor and what it takes to isolate a virus. But I'll shut up there before we hit that.
Okay, I mean, so there, like I said before, the scientific community wants to discover things. And so a rule of thumb is if you have a question that you want to ask, someone in the scientific community has probably already asked that question and done studies on it. So for things like radio waves and cancer, you can do something very simple where you look at the rates of where a brain tumor is in the brain, so like left hemisphere, right hemisphere, and see if that has changed with cell phone usage. Most people are right-handed, they hold their cell phone up to their right side of their head. It hasn't. And it makes sense that it hasn't, because radio waves, they are not high enough frequency to actually break DNA bonds. So the way radiation, like UV rays, X-rays, cause cancer is they are very high frequency and they can physically break the covalent bonds in the DNA backbone. So like the DNA's double helix ladder, it can just cut that in half if a subatomic radio particle, just like a UV ray, breaks through it. And then the DNA has to repair itself. Sometimes the repair doesn't happen properly and you get mistakes. That's how those things happen. But radio waves can't do that. They're not strong enough to break those DNA bonds. And so it makes sense that with all of these studies showing that radio waves actually aren't causing cancers, there's a mechanism for it, right? It's not strong enough to do it. So, and I know of the claims. I think Tom Cowan is where I first heard it about this idea that, radio waves brought all these new diseases. I don't think that really holds up when under scrutiny either. Are you talking about like how, like the invention of the radio and then the great influenza, that kind of thing?
I'm saying that radiation has an effect, and it has really not been thoroughly expressed. I can't speak for the scientific community and how much it's been studied, but we're in no way, shape, or form are we warned about the possible negative effects. And I'm not going to oversimplify it and just say radio waves. I mean any kind of radiation, whether it's microwave radiation from your microwave, whether it's Wi-Fi radiation, whether it's cell phone, mobile radiation. And listen to me, microwaves, I can tell you from my time in the military, microwaves have been weaponized. So depending upon how strong the frequency, it absolutely is debilitating. In my research and my personal experience, I've never really seen the medical community warn about the dangers of radiation in general in its very many varied forms. And I can tell you something else, kind of a red flag for me, is how the Spanish flu coincided with the promulgation of radio from the military, and how interesting it is that the vast majority of victims of the Spanish flu were young men of military age, roughly about the same time that the militaries worldwide were putting radio antennas on everything, massive antennas on bases, and on ships, on vehicles, and there is a huge new radiation influence, and no one's addressed this. That's what I'm talking about.
Well, so in my mind, if it were radio waves that had caused the Great Influenza of 1918, 1919, I mean, radio waves didn't go away, right? They kept using them. The usage actually increased as you move further into the 20th century, and yet the Great Influenza did not continue at the same rate. So that would be the first indicator to me that maybe radio waves weren't causing this, right?
My response would be is that perhaps there is an adjustment phase amongst humanity, that they're exposed to a new toxic influence that requires some time for bodies to acquiesce to it, to get used to it. I see your point, but I would say maybe there's a coping that occurs on a massive scale, on a general scale, that maybe accounts for how it is that they particularly radio increased and the same illness did not increase as well.
So if that were true, then we would expect, like, when communities around the world gradually introduce radio waves, because it wasn't introduced all over the world at the same time, right? Wealthier countries introduced radio waves and radio usage first, mainly, like you said, military used it first, and then civilians used it, and then poorer communities used it. It reached more and more communities later, but we didn't see like a great influenza effect go with the rate of its introduction into different communities. We saw a global pandemic happen where people were getting sick with the same symptoms around the same time and dying in great numbers. And then we saw waves of that, right? There wasn't just one wave of the great influenza. It happened over a period of about 2 to 3 years, where you had multiple waves of illness and death. And that doesn't really track with the idea that radio waves were causing it.
I don't want to oversimplify it, Dan. I'm just saying that, to me, I think it could be a primal factor, but not all encompassing, where it was just the introduction of radio that was the cause of the Spanish flu. I would also say that the World War I greatly skewed that, where it put the influence of radiation where it would not normally have been, exposing large members of a population to that would not normally have been exposed to that as a toxin. And here, I guess, back up and hit the big picture of cynics and skeptics, and what our concern is: terrain versus germ theory. Between the two ideologies, for a skeptic, I'll tell you, it's a lot easier. So if you see perhaps that the world powers, the world money has malignant designs upon humanity, between the two paradigms, it's a whole heck of a lot easier to exploit germ theory than it is terrain theory. Just in a very general summary sense, germ theory says, well, your illness and your health comes from not necessarily your environment. Yeah, there's environmental factors, but it's not nearly as important as DNA or viruses. And, well, okay, so how does the average person address that? If I want to do the science, do I have to rent an electron microscope? No. You have to trust the experts. You have to trust the science, trust the medical establishment, trust the government. And I'll tell you, brother, governments in particular have a pretty bad track record in relation to exploiting power, abusing power. And I would dare say, from some of the stuff I've seen, I get to that if you want in a minute, on the history behind the radical changes in the medical industry, not a very good track record there. So in general, between the two paradigms, it's a lot easier if you're looking at it from the perspective of, say, Carnegie, John D. Rockefeller and Andrew Carnegie getting together and say, we want to take over the medical industry because people are a threat and they're useless eaters, and we want to find new and inventive ways to sicken them, rob them, and have them not be aware of it. I'll shut up just to
So
let you jump in.
so yeah, I mean, the again, the scientific community is a global community, right? When I went to Carnegie Mellon University, I didn't have the ideals and ideas of Andrew Carnegie influencing anything I was doing, right? It was just my research group and our collaborators all talking about what can we do to find something new, to discover something interesting and cool. That was our goal, and that's the goal of every research group all over the world, right? They want to um, they want to find things that are new and exciting. And I think that that it's really important to understand that aspect of how the scientific community works. And I would also again reiterate that germ theory does not say that there's nothing you can do about your health. Germ theory says that there are microorganisms in the world that can infect you and make you sick. It's not saying that's all that makes you sick, right? Because there are plenty of environmental things and just lifestyle things that can influence your health. There are also genetic things that can influence your health. There's lots of different ways that people can become sick. And there are lots of different things that people can do to prevent those different things, right? I mean, people people are like you say that powers that be, it's easier to manipulate germ theory. I think if terrain theory were the reality, I think it would also be easy to manipulate because we see marketing ploys and powers that be pushing things like fast food, pushing things like smoking, and not caring about the well-being of people. They just care about making money, right? And so I think powers that be being able to manipulate your environment is also just easy if that's what they want to do. But we do have the ability to look at evidence and data that is not beholden to any one government, right? There are scientists in every country looking at these problems and working together. You know, who cares what their governments are saying? My work was not influenced by whatever government was in charge at the time, and I haven't heard any of my collaborators or anybody at any scientific conference that I've gone to be influenced by their whatever their government wants them to say. Of course, there are some groups that are politically motivated or power motivated, but again, those ideas are called out by the scientific community because they don't stand up to what people can replicate themselves and test in empirical experiments and find in their data. So I don't think that, you know, I think you can flip your worldview and still have it be the same.
I
The
wanted to, can I
Go ahead,
jump
go
in?
ahead,
And
man. Yeah,
I
please.
wanted to say, I think this is a good time to hear what both of your thoughts are on Louis Pasteur and the champ and how this all, originated with germ theory, Louis Pasteur. I've heard both of you talk about it. So, Dan, do you want to talk about the Louis Pasteur and germ theory?
Sure, yeah. I mean, Louis Pasteur was one of the first scientists to demonstrate that microorganisms, particularly bacteria, can cause disease. Um, he was able to do some early experiments that laid the foundation that people then had to, who came after him, had to verify and then build upon. And anything that, they were doing to build upon it, if his foundational findings were wrong, their results would crumble. But it was built on, and now we have a more modern interpretation of germ theory. And my understanding of Béchamp was that he had the opposite view, but I'm not aware of any experiments or research that he did that stood up to scrutiny the same way Pasteur did.
My understanding is it was just the opposite. Antoine Béchamp did work on a fungal encroachment. I have to look that up. I've got files on it. I would say that for me personally, I'm extremely suspicious of Louis Pasteur, and particularly in his elevated position in history and science and medicine, given that his notes were made secret for 100 years. That he told his family, do not allow my notes to be circulated. And it was only until a disenfranchised member of his family allowed access that a Princeton professor that was still quite a Pasteur sycophant named Gerald Geisen was allowed access, and even Geisen, I think it's Geisen, I'm sorry, Gerald Geisen had to spin it in his biography as the private science of Louis Pasteur. And again, this is the major difference between terrain and germ theory, whereas those in the terrain camp would say, whoa, these are environmental factors. You're wondering about anthrax and where anthrax came from, and oh, well, you can't see it. You have to trust me. I have a microscope. I'm going to find that for myself, and you trust. And has nothing to do with how there's a new arsenic-based dip that we're treating our livestock with. And there's some controversy over whether or not Louis Pasteur was doing experiments on sheep and dogs, and in order to pad his data, just outright slaughtered the sheep and dogs so that he could have better proof. So I'm a little bit more of a skeptic in relation to, he was a chemist and not any kind of a doctor. As interesting enough was Antoine Béchamp, a French Roman Catholic chemist. Both of them were. So I'm a little bit more skeptical on his position.
Sure, but if we take the skeptical position and we say like, okay, what have people done to build on this work, right? It's not the it's not centuries ago anymore. We have decades and centuries of work that have followed, and again, like I said, if Louis Pasteur's foundational work of his experiments were wrong, then the work that built off of it, no work could have been built off of it, right? If you had to look at microorganisms with a microscope and saw that they were a particular way. If someone else did the same thing, they would say, I didn't see any of that. I saw something different. Like that would happen. Those foundational ideas would crumble. But we have a lot of work built off of that foundational idea of germ theory, and that these microorganisms can in fact make us sick.
Well, it's if I wanted to continue on with the skeptical vein, Dan, I would say that perhaps Louis Pasteur has been used as kind of a prop or a front to continue to have people dismiss environmental factors, and wherever there's micro or macro, wherever we have to, as I was saying earlier, whenever we have to trust the experts. So, I watched Steve Kirsch. I don't know why it is that Steve Kirsch has any kind of a reputation as alternative. He's not alternative. He's very much a gatekeeper for germ theory, was attacking Andrew Kaufman in relation to, well, do you have any papers? Well, isn't it possible to corrupt the paper writing process? How about just basic observations? I remember what it was. It was Steve had something, well, science is about questioning. Oh, absolutely. Science is about questioning. Science should be based on the scientific method, observable, testable, and repeatable. And the problem is that the average person may be able to observe and test very basic things, but when it comes to viruses, when it comes to space exploration, there's a lot that we have to trust the experts on. And if you have a worldview that says, okay, billions of dollars can easily corrupt this process, I would have a concern. And I have an example for Robert Koch, and how was that Louis Pasteur's work was built upon, just in a general sense. Was it that Louis Pasteur helped shore up the idea that there are things that we have to trust the experts to find, invisible viruses and invisible factors that cause illness that you can't see and you have to be vaccinated for? I would say there are concerns there among the skeptic community.
Well, I mean, toxins are also, like, in your view, they're also invisible, right? Like, and again, the scientific community doesn't say like ignore environment, right? There's many voices and a lot of data and a consensus in the scientific community that air pollution can greatly impact someone's health. Pittsburgh in, the 1940s, 50s, if you live there, you are your lungs are going to be impacted. Breathing in smog is not good, right? That's agreed upon. Using leaded gasoline and spewing that into the atmosphere. That was that was a discovery that went against a lot of powers that be, but the scientific community forged ahead and said, no, this is what the data are. We are doing this to our bodies. We're putting this out into the environment. We should stop doing this. And now leaded gasoline is not a thing in developed countries. I mean, it's it germ theory does not uh, exclude environment. I want to keep reiterating that because I think that's you seem to think that it does, but it doesn't.
Well,
It's
certainly
just part of our understanding of
de-emphasizes
how we get sick.
for me, Dan. It de-emphasizes environmental factors that are much more key in your health or illness process, and emphasizes things that you can't easily prove yourself. Like I said earlier, okay, if I wanted to, and I want to get into that before you go, is the virus isolation. Do I have notes on that? Come on. The virus isolation process. Yeah, here we go. The virus isolation process. That's not anything, where Steve Kirsch was slamming Andy Kaufman. Hey, isn't it about questioning? Well, yeah, who's doing the questioning? Who's finding the answers? And as long as I have to rely on someone else, can that process be co-opted? Okay. So, and again, big picture here, big picture. If you're cynical and you're worried about the process being co-opted and abused by powerful influences that have designs to rob you and sicken you and kill you, and just like you said so brilliantly, Dan, that there are toxins that affect you slowly over time. I will tell you from my own research, when I'm getting into things like nobility and Catholic clerics and power structures, and the black nobility and the Borgias, known as poisoners. I will tell you, the ultimate assassin is someone that knows how to give you a dosage, and they walk well away from you, and it's weeks later or months later, and you have no idea what's hitting you. And boom, you're getting sick. Now, there are skeptics in my community that say, okay, this is part of the problem with vaccines. Vaccines are covered. Vaccines are secret. You're not allowed to see what's in them. And there are adjuvants in them that are meant to stimulate the immune system that have metals, thimerosal, mercury, aluminum. And the body can't get rid of those. And they build up. And over time, they're going to have an effect. And then I would revert back to the 7 stages of disease that people just completely unaware of. Your body's screaming at you. You're having itching and rashes and things that may be misdiagnosed as pox or measles, when in reality, you've been poisoned. And you don't realize what it is, that it's the accruing. And, what's in the schedule? Is it up to by the time you're 18 years old, there's some 70 different vaccines that include boosters that you're taking into your system. Oh my goodness, your skin is being pierced over 70 times throughout your life. And all of that process has no liability to it, and it's completely secret because of a government's agreement with the pharmaceutical industry done in 1986, the Childhood Vaccine Injury Act. So danger, Will Robinson.
So I mean, a lot you said there was not correct, but I'll just go back and I'll ask you this question. So when it comes to toxins and what you know is poisoning you, right? I mean, you can't see toxins, right? You can't see metal particles. You can't see air pollution. You can't see these things. So who are you trusting to tell you that they are toxic? And who are you trusting to tell you that they're in certain things? Because you yourself don't have access to a mass spectrometer, right? You can't tell yourself if things have these components in them. So like, who are you trusting
Sure, sure.
to
I
tell
would.
you?
First of all, I know you don't have the time. I would love to see of all that I just said. Give me some specifics of what it is that I'm way off base on. But to answer your question, listen. A lot of that is going to be trial and error. You on your own aren't trusting this whole idea, this whole genre of go to a guy in a white lab coat with an honorific and a stethoscope and blindly accept advice. You have to do trial and error on toxic influences. Hey, clearly, if you decide that you're in a job that is stressful and you're experiencing negative effects on your physical health, then you have to pinpoint that influence. Relationship. If you're in a relationship that is causing you ulcer, okay, great, I'm making a leap here. You've got ulceration, you've got ulcers in your mouth, and you're saying, well, I never had these before. There's a new influence. You have to isolate the influence. And just like you said, Dan, people on the outside that have malignant designs on you can easily spin the influences and confuse you. You, the average individual, is responsible. So when I hear trust the science, trust the experts, again, that's another red flag, because you yourself have to do a process of elimination to find out what those negative influences are. And there's going to be a lot of people lying to you because those are people that benefit from you being sick and going into a situation where your symptoms are treated with a drug or a surgery that's so damn expensive you can't afford it. You need a new group of corruptocrats called insurance to bleed you regularly to fight you on not paying for the healing you don't get.
So you said trial and error, but you didn't say who you trust to tell you after they've done that trial and error. Because scientists, we do trial and error all the time. We do experiments that are controlled and heavily scrutinized by our colleagues to for any bias or flaws in the experiments, and we report those results. So I mean, like, again, you can't see toxins; they're invisible. So who do you trust to tell you that aluminum is toxic or that air pollution is toxic?
Sure. Yeah. That basically you do need to get help from experts, and what I would hope is that those experts have garnered your trust because of a track record of doing something similar in the past. And this goes into the entire process of what it means to become a doctor today. How do you become, prior to 1847 and the American Medical Association, and 1910, the Flexner Report that was put together by the Rockefeller Carnegie cabal, the only thing on your resume as a healer was that you heal people. And there it is. There's your resume. Heal people. And you're responsible based on that. Let me just throw this out real quick for you, and you can give me a counter. But then we have a completely new paradigm from people that probably didn't love us very much. The Carnegie Rockefeller cabal saying, okay, so how do we co-opt? How do we, like in 2009, Bill Gates calls together a secret meeting of billionaires to address population control. Oh, it's really about philanthropy because people that are billionaires, they really love us. So how do we co-opt a massive genre of something that everybody needs, healthcare, and spin it and choke point it so that we can flip it, we can gaslight it, we can take people that are indoctrinated. Doctors, dossier has nothing to do with health and have everything to do with just reading a textbook. And no longer do you have practical experience going in and healing. I got it. You in general, you go and you do a practice, but for the most part, you have to be accredited. You have to be licensed, and the government decides this is what we can emphasize and de-emphasize. And if we want to now suddenly emphasize synthetic drugs, and we want to completely wipe out natural helps and natural cures, well, and you have to come to us for your license and anything, because the government loves you, by the way. The government does this because they love you. It's not that the government's been co-opted by billionaires and they're all in bed together, which is exactly what the 1986 Childhood Vaccine Injury Act, zero liability. No other industry anywhere has zero liability. Okay? And this is exactly what skeptics are worried about, this whole licensing process. And we'll add the licensing process, this whole genre, not genre, but this whole culture that doctors are altruistic. They're above. They have an honorific. They're a doctor. As soon as you hear doctor and you see a white lab coat, you see a stethoscope around the neck, suddenly you turn off your brain. A doctor can never have an ulterior motive. A doctor can never be motivated by greed. A doctor can never be co-opted. They are just above that. Lawyers, your honor, the right honorable. They can never, and yet lawyers and doctors are the ones that use Latin and have all kinds of extra time and money to go into politics. So this choke point, this Rockefeller Carnegie choke point that started at the turn of the century, is what radically altered healing and gives us no choices. Where it can really go where someone has a holistic approach, a so-called alternative. It's slammed. Go and look it up Wikipedia. Alternative medicine. That's not real medicine. You need medicine. You need a substance to make you well. Where can you go? No, their license gets pulled. And that's the concern that we have. It's a death grip on healthcare.
Okay. So, I mean, again, I'll go back to, your whole thing was you had a problem with trusting the experts, but then you said that there are people you do have to trust in order to tell you that things like aluminum
to point you in
and air
the
pollution are
right
toxic.
direction for you to do your own work.
Right.
To point
So-
you in the right direction. That's what I meant.
But you're
I'm sorry.
not. But you're not going to use a mass spectrometer to find out like
You
where
can't.
where
And
things are.
Can that be abused?
Right.
Can that be easily abused? Okay, I have to rely on you to use a mass spectrometer, and you tell me the truth, and no one with money can influence you and make you lie to me. That's the skeptic point.
If someone pays me to publish some fraudulent mass spectrometry results, someone else is going to try to replicate it, and they're going to get different results, and they're going to say, "Hey, what the hell did you just do? I got completely different results. What did you do? Let me see your methods." And then it goes deeper and deeper, and then they find out, "Oh, you just lied." That's what happens in the scientific community. Those lies like that are quickly uncovered because other people are also trying to correct that work. If you find something new and exciting, like toxin, like a new toxin in the atmosphere, other people are going to want to build on that result to find new exciting findings. And if your initial finding is wrong, they're not going to be able to build anything off of it, and you're going to get called out as a liar. So that's how science works. And I think in your worldview, whoever you're trusting to tell you that aluminum is toxic, you can just say the same concerns you have about them as you do about the people who tell you that viruses are real and can make you sick. I don't know if what makes you think that the people who tell you that aluminum is toxic and you believe that, how they're immune from these nefarious influences that you are concerned about. But I think I see it as like the same thing. And then moving on to like, the Flexner report. There was medical school before the Flexner report. But again, that's a very American-centric view because of the Flexner report just influenced medical schools in America. It didn't influence medical schools in Asia or UK or Australia, Africa. It didn't influence those medical schools. They had their own systems and their own ways of doing things. But what all of these scientific and medical societies do is they converge on the evidence, right? And they're all checking each other, like I said before. If one is publishing false data that others can't replicate, they get called out. And so it like in other countries where they have socialized healthcare where you don't have to, it's not for profit, they have better health outcomes. And so like it's just a very American-centric way to look at things. Yes, the healthcare industry is corrupt. Yes, there are a lot of things in the medical system in America that are broken, but it's not really like, I think the real issue is just that we need to focus on these people who are hell-bent on making a lot of money and gaining a lot of power, and not necessarily throw out all of the science that has been established by powers that are not corrupt or not provably corrupt, because it's all found by people who work independently of each other to find the next most exciting thing in science, right? So we can get into like the science of how viruses are isolated and how they're shown to cause disease, and that can be an example of like, this is what we show to be true, and this is the progress we can make off of that discovery, and here's the progress we have made off of that discovery. Like we can go through examples like that and say like, okay, we have reason for the average person to trust these people. I don't trust any scientists. I don't just blindly accept what they say. I need to actually see the work and see what they actually did to show that what they found is true. right? But the average person, like, if I go to a topic like how the lights in my room work, or like my computer works, I don't know. I need to trust someone on that. I can't know everything. I need to trust someone knows how to work with the lights in my house. And if I see them on, then I know that they fix something and that it works. And like the average person has to also trust in lots of things. We have to trust that the builders who built our homes knew what they were doing and our houses aren't going to just fall in on our heads, right? But people within those fields of construction and electricity and um, computer how computers work, they all are doing the same thing too. If they're doing bad work and their houses are falling apart, no one's going to want them to build their house. And if they are doing things uh like just making crappy products, then no one's going to want to buy their product. In science, if your results are not leading to sustained discoveries and future work, then your work is useless. And similarly in medicine, if your medicine is not producing results by reducing or eliminating disease, then no one no one's going to want it.
There's definitely some
Yeah,
gray area there. You can have, I mean, how often have you been bilked by someone that supposedly did repairs or did work for you, and actually did shoddy work for you, or actually repaired something? Car repairs happens all the time. As someone that made a repair that you didn't even need. So exploitation of ignorance happens all the time, and I would dare say that this is not really a critique that we found, that I have found in my research, of either the medical industry or the scientific community. Very few people are questioning whether or not science is co-opted or corrupted in the examples of things that the average common person. So there's grades of trust, Dan. What I
Sure,
mean is,
sure. Sure, like if
go ahead.
like if I take my car to a mechanic and they charge me for something that wasn't needed or whatever, like that's shitty. They shouldn't have done that. That happens all the time. But that doesn't mean we say that mechanics don't know anything and that, I can fix my own car and like cars don't exist. Like we don't go there. We just say like, yes, there are people in the world who will exploit this service.
The,
I think I wanted to jump in real quick, Johnny. Sorry. Dan, you were saying how you could talk about how a virus has been isolated. I feel like
Mhm.
this is an important topic because I hear both sides constantly arguing different on this. So I'd like to hear both your takes on whether a virus has been isolated.
Mhm. Yeah. So, I mean, you mentioned Steve Kirsch. He is not, I mean, he's an idiot. I'll just say that. I
a
wouldn't.
rich one, a rich one.
Oh yeah, he's a rich idiot. There are lots of those these days, but I wouldn't hold any stock in what arguments he makes on behalf of germ theory and the existence of viruses, because he doesn't understand them himself. But um, a virus can be empirically shown to exist and be isolated by just some simple empirical experiments. So, for example, I have a friend who talks a lot about plant viruses because he's a plant biologist. He can take a plant that is infected with a presumed virus. Let's say it has some spots or some discoloration on it. It's clearly a sick plant, and he can grind up the leaf. He can filter it, put it through um, a filter, a sieve, things that will reduce the size of the particles that you're getting coming out down to the size of like smaller than a bacteria. So anything that you're getting through that filtration device is smaller than a bacteria. So we can see bacteria with a microscope. We know those exist. We can see fungus with a microscope. We know those exist. So all those things are eliminated. Could still be a toxin, right? So you put that material in the presence of a new plant, right? And you see, does it make it sick? Oh yeah, it does. And then you repeat the same process of taking that material that you get and introducing it to a new plant. So you see that it's replicating, right? You see that it's not just a toxin that you're diluting through multiple introductions to different healthy plants. It's replicating. And then you can do lots of different experiments in order to characterize that virus and see what it looks like and see how it functions. And you can manipulate components of it to see what those manipulations end up doing to a plant. It's the same thing with animal viruses. You can you can take them from you can take biological material that is presumed to be infected or not infected with the virus, and you can use experimental techniques to filter out or isolate that virus. You can even use biochemical methods to specifically pull out those viral particles that may or may not be there. And in all these experiments, of course, there are controls that verify that, yeah, you have something that is smaller than a bacteria that is replicating, and then you can figure out what it's made of. So, yeah, those techniques are really standard in virology, and we don't have to just like anybody can go into a lab and do basic experiments if they're invited. And my friend, who is a plant biologist, invites people who doubt viruses exist. He invites them all the time to come to his lab and try these experiments with particular plant viruses.
But he doesn't see them necessarily himself. He just feels that he's isolated toxins that he identifies as a virus, and he puts them in. He follows Robert Koch's postulates, right? Which
sort of, they're not really relevant to Koch's postulates are outdated in multiple, like even for bacteria, they're outdated today.
Pretty straightforward. Prove that there is a toxin, that it causes illness that is present in the patient. Isolate the toxin, whatever it is. This, I think, is a sociopathic method, by the way. Stick the isolated toxin into a new healthy victim, prove that it sickens the victim, and then re-isolate that to me, that entire process using whatever it is, whether it's human victims or animal victims, it's sociopathic. It's different issue. It's pretty straightforward, but not to argue Koch, because I know you got to go. Let me just get in real quick on my concerns. Oh my goodness, I'm sorry for doing this. Let's hear. My concerns about the virus isolation process. And again, if you're a skeptic, the big picture is there's too much trust and not enough that I can do on my own. So if I have a patient and the patient is sick and I'm trying to localize what it is, the factor that made that patient sick, the very paradigm is I have to go through a crazy, in-depth, multi-step process to find this invisible factor of what it is that makes you sick, as opposed to strictly examining your environment to show those factors that you can see for yourself. And you may have disagreements on what I found is the virus isolation process, but starts with a sample being taken. Now, from what I've seen, my basic chemistry back from high school, as soon as you take a sample from a living organism, really the best place to examine a sample is in the organism. As soon as you take a sample out of the organism, it immediately starts to degrade. So there's the first concern. Then you add ethylene dimetetric acid, EDTA, as a preservative. Okay, you're changing what the sample is. You then put in virus transport medium.
Well, the EDTA is to help it prevent it from degrading because it inhibits enzymes that would chew up biological material.
And hopefully you're not changing the sample in a way that will make it harder for you to examine the sample.
I don't think why would it though? Because you're just
how do you
inhibiting
know? It's completely you have no idea what you're looking for. And
well, yeah, we know how EDTA works. We know it inhibits enzymes that would otherwise chew up protein.
You can absolutely guarantee that EDTA has no effect on a sample whatsoever.
We know what it does.
Positive or negative. Okay, that's just one of the steps. Okay, you put virus transport medium in the sample.
I mean, what you can do is you can take a sample, look at it fresh, and do a bunch of analysis on it fresh to characterize it, and you can take sample that's been stored in EDTA for a time period and compare the results.
Yeah, that's not how it's done. This is the standard. This is the SOP, the standard operating procedure.
I'm telling you that this is like the foundational work that people do to say, like, yeah, EDTA, we can use it as a preservative.
It's okay.
People had to figure out that it's a preservative.
And that's just the first step. Then you purify the sample by putting it in a centrifuge. Well, who's to say that the materials that are heavier or lighter have any effect on what it is that you're looking for? Why is it assumed that the weight of the materials in the sample has a direct effect on isolating a virus?
Well, you're separating things, right? So, like I said, bacteria are bigger than viruses. There are human cells in that sample that are big, and those can be pelleted. If you spin in the sample really fast, those gravity will take those samples to those materials to the bottom, and the lighter viruses are going, or just lighter material that are not big enough, not as big as bacteria or human cells, are going to stay in what we call the supernate, the liquid that is on top of the pellet. That's not the only way to do it. You can also put it through a filter that filters out all those things. But it's one of the ways you can just separate by size things in the sample to simplify it, to say, okay, I'm isolating the variables. The small things we're going to test and see if it causes a particular effect. The big things we can test to see if it causes a particular effect.
But you're presupposing that weight is a factor when you're dealing with a complete unknown. You're presupposing that weight of the material is a factor when you're dealing with an unknown, and that
no, we're not presupposing anything. We're simplifying the mixture, right? You would acknowledge that there are bigger things and smaller things in that sample,
but when,
right?
When you don't know what you're looking for, how do you know that you're going to make it easier to find your unknown because weight is a factor?
So you can say I want to test the small things in the sample, and I want to test the big things in the sample, and you can do your tests with those separate components and see what effects you get. If you don't get the proper effects, maybe it's a combination, and you can try treating the sample differently next time. But that's a way to just simplify and separate the components. And in this case, when we're talking about viruses, when you take out all the big components and you have only things that are on the nanoscale, then you get these observed effects.
Right. You're observing effects. You're observing effects, and then you're drawing conclusions, not based on what you have, not like normal separation. I want to separate, or I want to isolate the bottle from the koozie. I've isolated the bottle from the koozie. That's not really what's taking place. What is fetal bovine serum, and why does that play
So that's a component that is in cell culture, and it's to help the cells actually divide because it provides growth factors to the cells. Were you not aware of what that does?
This doesn't have any kind of an effect on muddying the waters. You're actually trying to find something. You're not adding biological material. Where does fetal bovine serum even come from?
It's pretty much where it sounds like. It comes from fetal calves, and it's the serum that provides growth factors
it's
for
demonic,
cells
brother.
and culture
It's demonic.
to grow. Now let me ask you, do you know if fetal bovine serum is used only in virus isolation?
I don't know that has anything to do with what we're talking about. I will tell you that fetal bovine
you're
serum.
You're asking me about it, so I'll tell you that it's used in pretty much all cell culture.
Oh, I bet it is.
So if you're growing cells outside the body, out in a flask, you need growth factors because they're outside the body. They're not receiving growth factors to continue dividing, right? So you can introduce fetal bovine serum into the cell media, and that's going to help them actually divide. And you can grow cells like this for a long period of time, and they look very happy and healthy. You can grow your controls in the same mixture, and they look very happy and healthy. But it's only when you add the virus or the small things in the sample that you see these observed effects in cell culture, which is where I'm assuming we're going.
Right. Well, before we leave the fetal bovine serum, let's talk about, well, not talk about, but just explain that it comes from the domesticated farm market, usually from milk cows, where these animals are milked to death, and they die with a calf in the uterus, and the calf is pulled out and chopped up, and parts of its brain are taken for this serum. It's absolutely insanely demonic that it's used both in this process and in the vaccination research process. I would dare say if the average person knew that this was a critical part of virus isolation, they might have a concern. But we're not even halfway through it, because after this,
it's not necessary in order to see a virus.
But it's
not
common.
Necessary to have.
It's commonly
FPS.
used. It's commonly used.
It's used in cell culture, not just virus isolation.
Sure,
it's used
sure.
in cell culture. I agree. It's very, very morbid, but I mean, it's no more morbid than the meat industry, which most people accept.
Sure, I'm with you on that. It's not morbid. It's malignantly exploitative, that to a point where the average person has no clue about it. And if they did, they would probably have a very negative reaction and force the system to change how it does things. Halfway through, then we add, we use as part of the culture, rhesus monkey or African green monkey kidney cells.
Not necessary to use those in particular, but you use cells that are permissive to most
It's common.
viruses, cells that aren't going to resist viral infection. And so a virus needs a host in order to grow. Similar to how if you want to isolate bacteria, you need to use a plate that has nutrients and food on it. So the cells are basically the nutrients and food in that example for viruses, right? You can't isolate it without having a host. So you're just introducing a host for the virus to infect and replicate so that you can increase the number of viral particles in your sample and more easily characterize them. You can characterize viruses straight out of a body too, but in order to grow and characterize a virus, you need to have a host for it.
Dan, we're adding a lot of biological material in an effort to find an invisible unknown. I have concerns.
And all of those biological materials are present in your control as well, in your uninfected control as well. And you never pull a virus out of those. Virologists have never pulled a new virus that was not previously there before out of a control.
Well, let's finish on we're at like 2/3 of the way. Minimum essential medium, Eagle, is added. It's a synthetic cell culture named after Johns Hopkins NIH pathologist Harry Eagle in 1959 for the express purpose of pathogenic viral. Harry Eagle.
It's not for the express purpose of virology. It's for cell culture. Cells grow in that media all the time. It's basically like Kool-Aid. It's just going to provide sugar and fuel for the cells and also nutrients that the cells need, vitamins that the cells use to make their proteins that they can't make themselves. Like we know it's in it. It's used very commonly in just cell culture and just keeping cells alive in the lab.
Right. Well, then you can add, you will starve the culture of nutrients.
No. The nutrients are there. So this step, I know what people like Andrew Kaufman and people say about this. This nutrient starving is not nutrient starving. You are taking the fetal bovine serum out of the equation, so the cells don't divide, but they're still able to take in nutrients from the media, which is all they need to actually survive. But you're taking the FBS out because it can interfere with the infection process. If there's antibodies in the serum that can inhibit the infection, then you want to remove that for that step. And then you add the FBS back so the cells can keep growing.
And you're doing controls for each and every one of these steps. We've got like 8 steps so far. And you have each one of these steps. We're taking this out and putting that back in. So your controls are showing you have a different reaction from your original culture. We're not even done. Amphotericin, a fungicide, a toxic fungicide is then added.
Yeah, it's toxic to funguses, not to mammalian cells. It doesn't bind mammalian ribosomes the same way. So it doesn't kill mammalian cells. They grow happily in it normally, right? Like if I'm growing cells in a lab, which I'm doing right now, I keep them alive. It's going to have an antibiotic in order to prevent contamination. Because if I'm working with a cell line in a hood, everything's theoretically sterile, but stuff can still get in. And if bacteria or fungus start growing in my culture, that's hundreds of dollars and a lot of time lost. So scientists often grow their cells with antibiotics included, and the cells are very happy and healthy as long as they're being grown for.
Antibiotics like gentamicin also added.
Not super common. Gentamicin isn't super common, but it's used sometimes.
Okay, so here's my concern. We're trying to say to somebody what makes them ill, okay? Rather than necessarily focusing on all the environmental issues at play, we're going through this process, and I'm trusting you that at each and every step from this process, brother, this is a Frankenstein mix. This is a Frankenstein mix of biological
materials. If you don't understand
materials.
it seems weird, but it's a lot of different components that have been empirically tested to best grow cells outside the body. And again, viruses need cells.
And I'm trusting you that you're doing this to tell me something I can't see is really making me ill, and there's really that I don't have to just like
Actually,
um,
no, this isn't what's done commonly. It's we can sequence a virus. We can look for sequences of viral particles in a sick person and quickly tell them whether or not they are infected with a particular virus. And as their symptoms increase, generally the number of viral particles that you can find through sequencing will also increase. And as their symptoms resolve, you can see that number also go down. And you can design drugs to specifically bind to viral structures, viral proteins to stop that disease. That's what we've done with HIV. HIV is a particular virus that has a particular enzyme that it needs in order to complete its life cycle. And through virology, we have developed drugs that specifically bind that enzyme and inactivate that virus, and has brought people who are some of the poorest in the world, some of the most forgotten people in the world, in states of extreme late stage AIDS where they can't even get up off the floor and they're dying of diseases that would not otherwise kill them. It brings them back into a full life. And we have virology to thank for that.
my concern is whether or not something is being properly diagnosed as acquired immune deficiency syndrome. I'm finding that when the word syndrome is used, it's a catch-all for a dramatic range of symptoms that really you can call whatever you want. And I also am very suspicious that a guy by the name of Anthony Fauci can be pinpointed as foundational to the treatment of AIDS with a chemotherapy known as AZT, and that it was actually so toxic that the FDA had taken it off the market, and Anthony Fauci brought it back to treat AIDS with. And I'm also skeptical.
So it didn't work as a chemotherapy. That's why if they tried high
Yeah,
doses
it's killing
of it,
people
no, it was
as it
not killing
does
people.
when you give it to them for AIDS. Kills people.
Incorrect. No, 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 no. That is very wrong. And AZT, along with other
Magic
HIV
Johnson would disagree.
inhibitors, Magic Johnson is like a one-off
Oh,
case.
instead of him not taking
There are
AZT,
millions.
he's
There are
just one of
millions
those
people.
quirks.
There are millions of people who are alive now thanks to HIV/AIDS cocktails that keep them alive. Those people will be dead if they listen to people like you. Okay.
Right, absolutely. So why is it that AIDS and HIV just popped up out of nowhere in the 80s? It had nothing to do with a very harmful culture within the homosexual community to encourage them to
No.
go out and do
So we
amyl
still
nitrate and have whole weekends of orgies and take the hepatitis B vaccine to preempt any kind of sexually transmitted diseases. They're living an incredibly harmful lifestyle, and then out of the blue, we have a brand new virus to explain what it is.
So
that made them sick.
you're repeating stories that you have
Just
been
address
told,
it.
and
Don't tell me whether I'm repeating stories. Just address it.
You are repeating stories, and I will
Just address
it.
whether it's right or wrong.
It's incorrect that their lifestyles
Why?
were causing AIDS.
Why did AIDS come up out of nowhere in the 80s?
Because it was spreading across the world.
Where did it come from?
Spilled
Out of
over,
nowhere.
It spilled over in Africa. It has been traced to
Africans having sex with monkeys.
in the Congo, where no, absolutely not. No, no, no.
That is a theory out there.
That is not the scientific theory, and it's really weird that you are stating it as if that's what scientists
I'm just
say.
throwing it out
No.
there. Where did it come from?
There are lots of different ways that animals can transmit viruses to us, even bloodborne viruses. There's bushmeat in some parts of Africa where hunters will hunt chimps and other primates and be in close contact with them, butcher them, and those blood-borne pathogens can transfer into them even if it's cuts in the mouth,
Is this
cuts
AIDS?
on the skin.
Are you talking about AIDS?
Yeah. Yes, HIV can transfer that way, and that is how it's thought to have happened. And then people sexually transmitted it amongst each other from there.
How did it come up in 1980s where it had no previous exposure to this? Suddenly we have this issue and it's widespread.
It was first detected.
in the West.
It was first detected in the West because we had good health infrastructure to surveil these instances of people
This
dying from
process here.
diseases that they should not.
We're able to isolate these viruses and
No, what happened was that they observed a lot of men in particular, a lot of gay men in particular, getting sick with diseases that otherwise shouldn't kill them.
eating that monkey
And
meat.
they found that they're specifically. Do you know what cell type is specifically depleted in AIDS patients?
Show me your science knowledge. Go
You're
ahead.
not skeptical enough if you don't know the answer to this. I'm just letting you know because you've accepted a story, but you haven't looked into the details of it. It's CD4 T cells that are depleted specifically in AIDS patients, and those happen to be the exact cell type that HIV needs in order to replicate. It infects them and it kills them, depletes the CD4 T cells, and then
and this is specific to homosexual men.
No, it wasn't specific for them. It was first detected in homosexual men because
It had nothing to do with their lifestyle.
Do we have to do a sex ed lesson here about how
again, this is
homosexual
exactly
men...
the big difference between us. The big difference between us is you're telling me that these are invisible factors I can't see for myself, and I'm telling you that these absolutely, the environment, the culture of the patients in question is central to their illness, and it's also why it came up so recently in the 80s.
Epidemiologists were aware of that. They noticed it particularly in gay men and also injecting drug users, and women were being infected with this at a disproportionate rate, all having to do with the mode of transmission that HIV was using in order to spread amongst people. It was bloodborne. It was sexually transmitted. Women are more likely to become infected with sexually transmitted disease because they're a receiving partner. It's similar with gay men. They're often both receiving partners, and the anal canal is going to be more easily ripped or injured during intercourse. So that's why the transmission was more pronounced in gay communities and noticed in gay communities, but it was global. It was noticed after that in Africa, where mostly heterosexual people are suffering from it, where mostly AIDS orphans are suffering from it because it's being transmitted from mother to child. And now, thanks to all of that knowledge of being able to say, hey, we see this epidemiological trend. We think it's a bloodborne, sexually transmitted pathogen. Maybe let's look for that. And then they find HIV. And they're able to characterize it and say, hey, we take this virus and we try to grow it in cell culture. We can't grow it in cell culture. Why can't we do that? Okay, let's try growing it in CD4 T cells, which happen to be depleted in AIDS patients. Oh, now this virus grows. Hey, let's try to inhibit its enzymes with specifically targeted medications. Oh, we inhibit that enzyme. These patients are now better. Their lifestyles have not changed, but they are now living normal lives thanks to these drugs.
Thanks to these drugs that we have no
you just reject
visibility
you
on.
reject that whole story, right?
Thanks to these drugs that we have no visibility on, thanks to the 1986 Childhood Vaccine Injury Act, which you regularly conflate.
No, they're not vaccines. They're not vaccines. What are you talking about?
How are you treating AIDS?
Medication, not vaccines. They're called antiretroviral inhibitors.
They're attacking viruses with the medication.
Specific proteins within the virus that they need in order to complete their life cycle. Yes. Do you know what that enzyme is?
Again, I have serious concerns given that I have to trust you on all this, and in relation to has nothing to do whatsoever with lifestyles, with outside influences.
Again, it's not nothing to do with lifestyle. If you live a lifestyle where you're more exposed to the avenues that HIV uses in order to transmit itself, then you're more likely to be exposed. That's why education was another really important factor in preventing the spread of HIV.
I have to go
back.
That
was emphasized a lot by the medical communities. It's not ignored. I don't know why you keep saying that medical communities ignore the environment and lifestyle.
It's not emphasized. Environmental factors are not emphasized.
I'm sorry. What was emphasized during the recent Mpox outbreak in recent years?
Mpox outbreak?
Mpox.
Mpox. Well, that's a new one.
Monkeypox.
Yeah. Okay.
Lifestyle was emphasized. They were saying, okay, we don't have a vaccine that is super effective right now. Please exercise caution in your lifestyle. Right. And then the virus transmission rates
another
went
new
way
boogie
down.
thing that we can't see. So you have to alter your lifestyle, put on a mask, whatever it is, that change your lifestyle. Trust us.
And in your worldview, you have to trust and believe that these toxins are where you think they are.
I'll tell you what I have to do. I need to see first that I'm even at risk. I don't want to be scared by an entire system that tells me, you're going to die, you're going to have this effect, you're going to have this illness. You need to change your behavior now to preempt this illness. And this system is definitely not corrupt, definitely not co-opted. You have to radically alter your lifestyle.
People who tell you that to be scared of all these toxins that you also can't see. I don't understand how this
not even anywhere. No one does that. No one does that. There are people that
maybe
do.
Kaufman does it a lot. Kaufman does it a lot.
Give me examples of invisible toxins he
says
scares people with.
he says you're living in a toxic soup. There's all these toxins here. Buy my supplements that are really expensive. And
Hey,
I
I'm
don't know
not going to
what's in them.
defend any supplement hawkers. I'm definitely not defending supplement hawkers. That has really little. That is not terrain theory.
That's how he makes his money, man. That's
Yeah,
like,
no, I'm not
that's how
defending
he-
that. I don't defend it. There are a lot of these people are very questionable in the supplement hawking. I'm not questioning. I'm talking different. I'm talking terrain. I'm talking how let's look at the pandemic, okay, and how people had to shelter in place when they weren't even proven. Oh, how do you know that you had coronavirus? You had to be tested. You had to have the polymerase chain reaction go in where the guy that invented it said with the right number of cycles, I might as well be a
No.
Buddhist. You can find anything and everyone.
No.
Don't shake your head. How am I wrong?
It's not true. He was wrong about that. Yeah, you can run PC.
Do you use
I
the
can- I
PCR to
can-
find the coronavirus?
I can run PCR on a negative sample for 70 cycles and not find what I'm looking for.
He was wrong about what he invented. He was
Yes,
wrong about what he invented.
Yes.
Okay.
Because we also
why-
don't use regular PCR to diagnose people. We use quantitative PCR.
Why
which
do
he
you
did
use
not invent.
PCR at all to locate and to find HIV and or coronavirus? These are the two big, scary viruses that in our generation, in our lifestyle. I think it's very suspicious
What do you
that
mean?
you use
why?
a process.
I mean, it's a technique that. Do you know what it does? Do you know what it detects?
Tell me, doctor of microbiology. Tell me what it detects.
I mean, like you have to. This is like
I have to
if
trust.
you-
I know. I have to trust. That's the problem.
No, it's that you're not even curious enough to like look at
Is that what it is?
What we scientists say.
I'm not
Because
curious when I have my
because you
job
don't-
telling me
you-
I'm going to get
you're-
fired unless
you're
I take this
repeating-
vaccine.
you're
That's
you're
where I'm
repeating-
curious.
You're repeating stories that you've heard and you don't. even
Dude,
know
just
the
address
basics.
it. Don't tell me what stories
I will,
false
I
stories
will,
I'm
but let
repeating.
me-
Just address
I will,
the actual.
I will, but calm down. Let me talk. Because you get. I hear the same. It's like a script. I hear it all over and
It's
over
not a
again.
script. Just
Kerry
address it.
Mullis invented it. He said this, therefore I don't have to look into what PCR is or what it does, or even how it's used today and how it's different from how he used it back in the day. It's like if you go onto a basketball court and say, all you refs,
I don't need a metaphor. Tell me why Kerry Mullis is wrong about his own process.
All you refs are out of here.
Tell me why
and-
Kerry Mullis is wrong about his own process.
Listen, it's like going onto a basketball court and saying, all you refs are wrong, get out of here. I'm going to
Dan, I don't need a metaphor. Tell me how when Kerry Mullis says, if I increase the cycles, I can find anything and
I don't even know
anyone.
what traveling is. Kerry Mullis was wrong because we can do experimental methods today to show that he was wrong. If I have a sample that is negative for a biological sample that is negative for a virus, I run PCR for 80, 70 cycles. It's negative. It's not going to be positive. He was wrong to say that you can find anything in any sample using PCR because he himself was an HIV/AIDS denier. He was
an HIV/AIDS denier. Let's go ahead and put him in a little cubby hole and say that the guy that gave us the methodology through which we find the invisible thing that I have to trust you, the experts on, he didn't even know what he was talking about his own process.
He didn't, because you're putting him in a cubbyhole of an inventor who knows what he's talking about. I'm looking at what he actually
Why would he know about his own
and
invention?
What we can actually do with it.
Why would he know
Because
about his own
didn't
invention?
invent qPCR. He didn't invent quantitative PCR. That's what we use today. It's much more accurate and sensitive than regular PCR. You cannot just find anything with it. So when you find a piece of nucleic acids, which I know you don't know that this is what it's used for, but when you find a piece of nucleic acids that is very specific for a virus that you can't find in human cells, you can't find in any other biological sample, it's only existing in the context of a viral particle, then you know you have that particular viral particle. And when you test someone with that method, you can say you are infected. You may not be sick right now, you may not have symptoms, but you are infected and you should act accordingly so that you don't spread it to other people.
Here's my concern, because what you're talking about is 100% trust. I can't do any of that on my own. I have to 100% trust the integrity of science. Observable, testable, repeatable, which it's not. We've got guys like Paul Offit that you have gone.
It's very much
you
repeatable.
have picked of all the people to interview. You interview Paul Offit. Paul Offit is basically Mr. Vaccine. Back in 2008, CBS News did a report on him. He had $1.5 million in profits on a vaccine patent. Okay,
Because he invented a vaccine.
Oh well, by all means, he should be a millionaire. then he should be a
that has saved
millionaire
hundreds
with
of thousands
no
of
conflict
kids
of
in
interest
poor
in
countries.
relation to. And he's the exact guy that I want to interview on the validity of the virus vaccine paradigm. Back to, you have yet to address the 1986 Childhood Vaccine Injury Act. There's no industry in the world that has blanket liability. When Bill
There is
Gates,
no
the new
blanket
vaccine.
liability.
I'm
There's
sorry?
no blanket liability.
Oh, I was
What the
blanket
vaccine
liability.
injury
That's why-
compensation
that's why
program
when-
did,
that's why when-
I'll explain for you, because this is a story you've been told, and I'll tell you what actually happened. The vaccine injury compensation program is meant to be a no-fault system where people who think that they have been injured by vaccines can go to
sue
that
the
court,
government, can sue the
can go
taxpayer.
to
Let
that
me
court,
answer.
which is funded by pharmaceutical industries who pay an excise tax on every vaccine that they sell. So it's funded by them. People can go to this court and they just have to show that they were injured in close proximity to receiving a vaccine. It's not even that complicated. And then they get compensated for it. But other countries don't have similar vaccination liability programs. And they don't, like, again, it's very American centric. And also, again, it's not blanket immunity, because if any pharmaceutical company working with a vaccine commits fraud or negligence, then they are absolutely suable by the government or any other body, right? It's not blanket.
I don't know of any example. I will tell you that this is why Bill Gates has invested. He is now an expert on vaccination. That when he invests
not.
what I mean by that is tongue in cheek. When he invests $1 million in vaccines, in pharmaceuticals, he gets a $20 million return. That's not me. That's Bill Gates' CNBC. $20 million return because of the help the government. When you sue, who are you suing? You're suing the taxpayer. You're suing the taxpayer. You go into a special court with no judge
You're talking about
and
the
no
vaccine
jury. Let me
industry.
finish now. No judge and no jury and no discovery. Everything remains secret. And if the government will use, I'm not done. The government will use its own Justice Department lawyers to defend the private pharmaceutical industry. And the best you can do, if you even get hurt at all, is maybe $250,000. And if you have a child that has become an invalid because of vaccine injury, that's not going to go very far. Okay? You sue the taxpayer.
No, you're not.
Sure you are.
The pharmaceutical industry is what funds it. Do you know what an excise tax is?
The pharmaceutical
Funded-
industry funds. No, it doesn't. Tell me exactly what the 1986 Childhood Vaccine Injury Act has. The pharmaceutical industry funding this. Funding what?
Where does it get its funding? The compensation program.
From the taxpayer.
No, it's from an excise
Sure,
tax.
it does. As a matter of fact, the United States
pharmaceutical
government, on
vaccine
your
sales.
behalf, has spent $4 trillion.
Those
You
are
have paid
excise
$4 trillion,
taxes.
not the
Those are
pharmaceutical
excise
industry.
taxes that the pharmaceutical industry pays whenever they make and
Right.
sell
What is it?
vaccines.
75 cents on each vaccine?
And it's funded
Yeah.
completely by that.
No, the taxpayer funds it, brother. The
Do you
taxpayer
wanna-
funds it.
Why do you think this? Like who are you
Why do I
trusting?
think this?
Who are
Why
you
do I think
trusting?
this?
Like
Because-
we can look up right now. How is
Right.
the-
Wait. We can go on the internet and look for anything negative about the coronavirus. No, we can't. It's completely wiped out. Look up anything negative about wearing a mask or taking the vaccine.
We said at the beginning we're not going to get emotional, and now you're yelling at me
I
because
can't help
I'm
it.
correcting
I
you.
can't
that
help it. You
vaccine
know what?
injury
You're
compensation
20 minutes
program
over time,
is
so I'm
funded by
probably
an
probably a
you
good
guys
place to
both
stop.
have done great, Johnny. Let
It's
him.
funded by an excise tax, not the taxpayer.
What's it called again for people to look up for themselves?
So the vaccine injury compensation program is funded with an excise tax. An excise tax is a
Excise.
tax on the company that they
Why
pay
is there a
every time they
special
sell
process at all?
sell an item.
Why is there a special process at all where you go into a government courtroom and they don't have to even appear? The pharmaceutical company doesn't even have to appear.
Because before the vaccine injury compensation program, the U.S. is very litigious.
No,
unlike
I'm
other
talking about the
countries.
1986
I'm
Childhood
ta-
Vaccine Injury Act, not
That's
the
what-
compensation program.
It's the same thing. The Injury Act made the compensation program. It's the same thing we're talking about. Okay.
You're gaslighting.
So before that, there were lots of frivolous lawsuits based on misinformation and disinformation. A documentary called Vaccine Roulette spread a lot of misinformation.
So you're
about
saying the justice system doesn't work?
Vaccines. Sorry?
You're saying the justice system doesn't work. Frivolous lawsuits that succeeded and cost
no.
the pharmaceutical industry money
No, they didn't
because the
succeed.
judges and juries just didn't know what they were doing.
they didn't succeed. What was happening was that there were lots of frivolous lawsuits being filed against pharmaceutical companies that they would have to pay for, not because they lost, but because they have to pay lawyers in order to actually represent them in the case. And also, all the misinformation was causing people to not want to get vaccinated. As a result, there were lots of outbreaks of pertussis, which killed a lot of children,
Right.
dead kids.
Right. Right.
And then
Dead
so
kids, we need liability protection.
So what the pharmaceutical industry said is, oh, you know what? We're not going to deal with this. We don't want to make vaccines anymore. Like, forget it if people don't want them. And the government said we can't have outbreaks of pertussis killing kids.
Right.
So they created this compensation program. Again, you don't have this in other countries. You don't have these compensation programs in other countries, right? But they still vaccinate. So this power dynamic boogeyman story that you're creating for the U.S.
I'd say pertussis
doesn't apply to other countries.
I'd say pertussis is a boogeyman story. I'm not saying that the illness is boogie. I'm saying that it's being spun. Once again, we have to trust you. We have to blanket cover. We have to give them a protection no other industry has, so that they can do things that are completely secret that I can't verify myself. So, for instance, when peasants, well, give me some examples. When peasants are pooping in the street and living in bad life conditions, it's not what their environment is. It's bubonic plague. When livestock is being treated with arsenic as an insecticide, it's not arsenic. It's anthrax. When we've already covered my concerns about the Spanish flu. When kids are running under DDT sprinklers, it's not DDT. It's polio.
It is polio because
Absolutely.
DDT doesn't
Absolutely.
cause
I have
the
to trust
symptoms
that you
polio
found it.
does.
Yeah, it has nothing to do with new insecticides that affect the neurological
It
system.
feels like you
with
want to
mercury in
just
them.
say that you don't trust experts and you're using that as a blanket
No,
reason to
we can
dismiss
say
a lot
no.
of
I'm not
stuff that
blanketing.
is
We can
genuinely
just say that
interesting and cool and helpful to the human race. And
absolutely it's been helpful.
I don't know why you would
Not
dismiss
been
it without even learning
exploited
the
at all.
basics
When
too.
I have to 100% trust science for
And
things,
you're
there's
100%
no way that I
trusting
can
the
prove
people who tell you
myself.
that
It would
toxins are
never be
causing your
exploited.
illness.
They have a white lab coat on. They would never lie to me. They would never try to poison me or rob me. They have a white lab coat on. They have
I
all
don't
these
think that
spinning
way.
tubes.
That's a cartoonish way to look at the world. I don't think that way.
Absolutely. So, what industry do you blindly trust? We talked about computer repair. We talked about car repair. What industry do you blindly trust to never make a mistake, to never have an agenda?
None of it's really blind because we look for the results, right? But we have to trust.
And the results
We
can
have to
never be
trust in-
compromised. They can never be corrupted. They can never be bought.
We have to trust in things to an extent, right? And that doesn't mean things can't be corrupt, but that corruption in science gets called out because others try to build off of it, right? So when
Others who read a textbook.
but the thing is, you're dismissing these things without understanding them. Is
It's
what I'm
ignorance.
seeing.
I just don't know what I'm talking about. I'm good.
Well, I
Vinny,
mean,
if you
we've
if you
shown
have
that
anything
here.
else, I'm good.
We've shown that here that you're not really
Obviously, listen,
learning
I
the
need to go and study microbiology. I need to be licensed and accredited that I have been indoctrinated before I can fully understand what I'm talking about.
All right, I'll jump in here. First off, I thought for over an hour you guys did great.
We were doing good. It's my
And-
fault. I'm Italian. I take responsibility
too.
for going
Italian
off.
too. So
So all three of us are Italian. All right.
I take responsibility.
I
for
do
going
have
off.
one more thing. Maybe we could is Kennedy. I would love to hear. Or you could go out.
He defends germ theory. Why are we even bringing him into the question?
Well, no,
He's-
Dan has called out issues with
yeah, he's
RFK.
written.
So I'd like to maybe let that be the final thing for you guys.
Okay, I don't know. I can speak on it.
He's actually written multiple chapters in his book about how HIV doesn't cause AIDS, and he entertains terrain theory way more than what he would like you to believe. He also his company Children's Health Defense, while he was still head of it, published articles claiming that polio was a toxin and not a virus. So he's an idiot. He's
an idiot
should
because
not-
he believes that?
Oh yeah. He should not be in charge of HHS.
Right.
He ultimately what this ideology goes to, what it works towards, what RFK's ideology does, whether you subscribe to train theory or not, it works towards more dead kids because vaccines save millions of lives, and these dead kids are going to make up primarily the poorest communities because they don't have the good health infrastructure needed to prevent deaths from vaccine preventable diseases. They don't have the proper nutrition to sustain themselves against infectious diseases. So those poorest, most vulnerable people of the world, most forgotten people of the world are the ones who suffer most from accepting RFK's ideologies. And that's just a tragedy. And it's really sad. And I don't think it's acceptable at all.
I don't even know how he is. Well, I do know how he is because he's a Jesuit-trained Kennedy that is an elite. He's a lawyer. He's a politician from a family of wealthy, elite lawyer politicians, many of them Jesuit-trained. Interesting, though, we're going to do a whole show on the Kennedy family, how it is that Robert Francis Jr. Is now supposedly a hero, where he still defends, brags about how all his kids are vaccinated. I absolutely agree. Now, this is just in my ignorance. I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm not an accredited microbiologist. It absolutely explains to me the unhealthy lifestyle of homosexuals in the 80s. Absolutely explains to me how HIV, the syndrome, would suddenly pop up out of nowhere. Absolutely easily explains, makes sense to me, how brand new toxins, insecticides that have not been used before, easily explains neurological disorders, paralysis in polio. So I'm an idiot too. I absolutely would agree with Robert Francis on HIV. That Anthony Fauci was foundational to the discovery and the treatment of back in the 80s. It's why he's foundational to the coronavirus scam recently. So actually, I don't agree with a lot that he does in his family background, but I do agree with him on the very two things that Dan thinks he's an idiot on. So I guess that makes me an idiot.
I mean, when you say these things make sense to you and then you don't know
environmental
the basics
factors make sense to me, as opposed to trusting you
when you
that
don't
these
know
tiny
the
little boogie
basics
things
of the
that you
stories you're
found are
dismissing.
actually
When
it
you
does.
don't know the basics of the stories you're dismissing, and it makes sense to you. Like I don't know why you think that's acceptable to just not know these basics and still think that you have the correct and critically thought out worldview.
It's worldview, Dan. It's worldview. So for me,
One
I
worldview,
see. Hang on, let me
lots of
explain my
dead
worldview.
kids.
Hang on.
Other worldview,
Hang
lives
on.
saved.
Let me say. So environmental factors that I can verify myself in unhealthy homosexual lifestyles. I can see that they are introducing brand new amyl nitrate, poppers, and cocaine and alcohol all at the same time. Hepatitis. Hang on, I'm not done. Hang on, I'm not done. Don't tell me to stop. Let me finish what I'm saying.
No, stop.
All of these
ridiculous.
outside environmental factors.
It's ridiculous
Vinny,
because
can we
all
stop?
those
Don't tell me what I'm saying is ridiculous, okay? All of these factors, as opposed to the invisible thing that I have to trust you that you guys found.
You
Vinny,
can observe for yourself.
Vinny, I'm not. If you're going to talk over me, there's no sense in continuing.
If you observe
Vinny,
for
if
yourself,
it's going to talk over me, I'm not even done.
Observe for yourself,
Vinny. If there's going to talk over me, I'm not going to go on.
All factors are present and no AIDS is present. And what do you make of that?
What all factors? First of all, I'm telling
still
you
live like that
when
today,
you
and they can
diagnose
live normal
what is
lives.
AIDS, it's a syndrome. It's a whole swath of things that you decide even what it is.
Count of CD4 T cells. You didn't even know that.
Oh, that's what it is, and you're seeing that yourself. You've done that yourself.
We can test for that.
We can.
Why do you dismiss those tests?
The experts can test for that. And I trust the experts.
You just enjoy ignorance, I guess.
Is that what it is? I do. I enjoy ignorance as opposed to being able to see it and verify it for myself, being my own scientist as best as I can. I don't have the money. I don't have the ability to buy an electron microscope. So I have to go and say, well, wait a minute. If I'm going through an entire weekend of sex and drugs and poppers and cocaine and alcohol, maybe that's a contributing factor to this brand new disease that came out of nowhere.
Variables, or do you just hear a story and accept it?
Are we going to continue to talk over each other? Or we're just going to say we're good.
You're going to be yelling the same things over and over again.
Is that what it is? I'm just yelling the same things?
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
you're yelling and repeating what you've heard.
Let's go. I'm not yelling to be heard. I'm yelling because I'm excited.
No, I said you're repeating what you've heard.
Is that what it is? No, I'm telling you.
Yeah, because if I ask you about the basics on any of these topics, you don't know.
It's all the difference in the world. The environmental factors, the terrain factors, versus me just trusting you that through this massive process, this tiny little boogie thing is actually what's causing the illness.
Here, answer this honestly. Did you isolate the variables of poppers and promiscuous sex
and
do a study on a population level to see?
I would dare say that anyone would conclude poppers and cocaine and repeated homosexual sex. Stop. poppers and cocaine and repeated
You didn't?
homosexual sex and going without sleep will have an adverse effect upon your health that you will suddenly spin as a brand new syndrome caused by a virus I can't see. That's what I will say.
And those lifestyle factors have been around a lot longer than AIDS.
No, I would say that
They
a lot
were.
of that was
They've been around
pretty
a lot
new
longer
to the
than
80s.
AIDS. And if you do
I-
the work to isolate those factors,
I would say that's a
you will see that it does not cause AIDS.
I would
But you are
say-
trusting someone. You are trusting your whoever you listen to have done this analysis for
don't
you.
listen. I don't
You're
blindly follow
trusting-
anybody.
You're
I don't blindly
trusting
follow
people.
anybody.
You
I don't-
clearly do because you don't know the basics.
Is that what it is? I'm just
about.
ignorant. No,
You're repeating the same script
absolutely.
stories that I
This
hear.
the cultural
And if
trends in
that's
the
all you're gonna
homosexual
do,
community.
I'm gonna go
Okay.
relieve my wife of my kids.
Excuse me,
Dan,
Vinny.
hold on, George.
He's
Dan.
got to go, George. Let him go, pal. You can stay on for me and Vinny.
Dan,
okay.
I wanted to say thank you. I really appreciate it.
I do appreciate you coming on, Dan.
Thanks.
I
You could have
thought he
looked at
was
me and
go-
said, "This guy's a nobody. Why am I even coming on with this guy?" I do appreciate that.
No,
I
but
mean,
Dan,
you can tell Andrew and Tom and people that they're cowards and
They
don't.
don't.
wanna
Yes,
take
I will.
anybody.
They don't talk to me either. I will tell them.
no,
that.
and that's why you deserve respect. I mean, Dan was like, I will debate anyone. So, I mean, he deserves his credit. People, his YouTube channel is Debunk the Funk. Dan, I think you're way better than Professor Dave to me and these other guys. I really appreciate your patience and the way you handled yourself. I thought you guys did great to show both sides the mindset, and I just wanted to thank you, Dan.
I do. I thank you as well, Dan. I
Appreciate it.
apologize
and you
for
went
getting
way
Italian.
past, and you went way past with.
And thank you for all right. Thank you for staying
I did.
long. And I'm sorry for getting excitable, pal.
It's all right. We can talk more if you want, but appreciate
Cool.
you, Vinny. I'm gonna go relieve my wife of my kids now, so
All right, man.
she can
Appreciate
get
it.
to what she
Thank
wants
you.
to do. All right.
Well,
bye.
thank you.
Have a good one.